Hello, this is Brian Whitten and ET Art. I did have another purpose to come back and do the second part of the crossing. I did, and in the process of uploading that video at the moment, it was too long in its entirety, so I had to edit it somewhat. If you are 13 years or younger, if you would please go and get your parents or carer and just ask them to watch the video first. And if they say it's okay, that's fine. For those of you who have not been to the channel, I certainly would strongly recommend you go back and at least watch the other half, or the first half, of the crossing. What we are talking about is the multiple rings of rotation of Earth around the Sun. This is the one that we are on at the moment, travelling in an anti-clockwise direction, but in actual fact it also goes around the Sun in a clockwise direction, and also is pushed out to an outer ring 40 million miles beyond Mars. Not always, but sometimes it is necessary, and it moves both in a clockwise and anti-clockwise direction out here in the outer ring as well. There are off-plane cycles within this. When I say off-plane, we're talking in the circles here, the horizontal plane of the Sun, and there are two rotating vertical planes that are displayed in this image, and they are these two here. They are very wide. The horizontal plane, which is the round circle rotating anti-clockwise, and these two planes rotate clockwise. So that is where we are, and what we'll do is go on from there and understand some of the things that we discussed in the video part 1. Okay? First of all, I wanted to discuss with you what happens, just so you understand what happens when we are knocked away from the plane here. I'm going to go to the top for this point and say that if our planet is going around the Sun in a clockwise direction like this, the Earth's plane is going around like this, right? So we're travelling on a plane within the horizontal plane like so. Now when the axis gets tilted here, it effectively tilts our plane like this. It is not that helps us leave the horizontal plane. Once that tilt, and when I insert now the eastern mastaba field, where we are looking at the setting sun and the recording of the setting sun and the moving equinox from 10 degrees to 24 degrees, as we are with the western mastaba fields, monitoring and clocking the rising sun and tracking it so that we know where it was, we are seeing an expanding angle. The angle, when I come back to here now, that angle is this 10 degrees tilt of the axis, right? That's tilted our axis 10 degrees, and it is recording that moving from there to 24 degrees. But it isn't just that plane that was moved. If we think about the Earth travelling around and being on a plane that is also flush in that angle, and what happens, it isn't just the plane of travel of the planet like this being tilted this way, it's being skewed that way. So if I actually held my line here, our plane of travel is now not on this plane, but it's also twisted like that against this plane. And that twist and that angle does not change. In other words, it doesn't stop. There's no process off the field with the two rotating vertical planes to change that angle. So it actually just keeps going. It's actual fact, it's part of the precession of the planet. And it just keeps moving. And what happens is it keeps moving until at one point it is within the field and diagonally adjacent to the field of the Sun. It is that skew of the plane that causes the situation. So when I said to you yesterday that the speed of this is how they shorten the process. So in other words, it doesn't necessarily have to be 6,000. I would expect that what they're telling us is that they can make it varying speeds, not necessarily by the angle that this moves away, but when it starts to move, the speed that it moves across here. So in other words, the precession itself. Next year it's there, next year it's there. That's what the precession does. It's a wobble on the planet. It takes about 27,000 years to go like this. But with the skew like that, and with it slowly expanding, it gets to a point where it's exactly in Q and in line this way, and there it is picked up. It doesn't matter if you've still got the 24-degree tilt on the axis, because it isn't that. That is how the planet manages to go through the plane twice every year without getting captured. In the outer ring, we are told something different. The outer ring of rotation here, when this cycle is done, it is a 7-hour day, which means it rotates extremely rapidly on the axis, spinning very, very quickly. It also traverses through space at almost twice the speed in one direction, whether it's going that way or that way. There are slight variations in both the movement of the planet around the sun that way, and whether it's also rotating clockwise or anti-clockwise. But the off-plane field here, or off-field, what they're doing here, and the reason we see that is they're telling us that movement that I just told you here, that gets captured down here, doesn't. And what they say is the axis, or the precession, actually completes. And it has to go, to complete it actually has to go through that angle 4 times to go round for the precession to move the whole way. So for that to be the case, that cycle that's off here, that has to be stopped. It has to be moved back in. It cannot gradually grab it as it does on the inner ring. And the reason they tell us that is the momentum of the planet out here in the outer ring is too fast. It's not just one thing that causes the issue, that velocity of the mass through the plane overrides the angle issue here. So even if it is skewed, it does not get picked up, and that's one thing they do tell you in the outer ring. I discussed this Egyptian parchment with you in my last video, and I wanted to come back here because we really needed to come to an understanding of a few more things with a little bit more clarity. The end cycles here, these first ones are 44,000, or 44, meaning 44,000 years, is telling us how many years we're on the cycle on the inner ring, reflective of these 2 cycles, and the outer ring, which is reflective of these 2 cycles. Okay, so what we are looking at here is a situation where we are being told there are different types of cycles. We've mentioned yesterday, or on my last video, we mentioned that these last 3 cycles here are of a different number. These are 44, that's 48, and that one's 65. They are 4 by 12, 4 by 12, and 5 by 13. We asked ourselves why that was actually the case, and we came up with a conclusion, in my opinion, that if you're going to add extra years, we are told in the outer ring here, no matter which way we go here, that people are not living out here. It might have people here in the line, but merely to display years. We've certainly got no humans living out here. It is rotating at speeds of 7, 8 and 9 hours a day. It is frozen. It is extremely cold. That's what happens. Any water on the planet here would be frozen. I would expect that we possibly would see that there would be transition or movement of water at some times from Earth to Mars. It depends on the cycle. Firstly, when we look at the 48,000 year cycles and look at the inserted glyph, that when we look at the plane of the sun, or plane of the planet moving, and I said the plate moves, and I said once our plate starts to move, it can only go a half loop. Right? So that is how they display that. It's a half loop like this. They did it in the same instance. If you watch my video called The Programmable Rock, it does a U like that, and it wasn't until a few days later, or a week later, I understood what they meant. That U is the plane moving only half a loop. It can only go halfway. It's not technically correct, that, but it's probably the easiest way for me to say it. In the instance of the 48,000, we're only seeing a 4,000 year increment. In addition to one of these cycles on the inner ring by 4,000 years, the only place that's probably going to happen is tacked on, like I said, this inserted glyph. In other words, when they come here, and if the population is divided here, it's 50-50. That's what's saying, it's 50-50. If they haven't got a 50-50 population on the globe at the time they get here that are not involved in what they are saying is a very, very, very big warning. We were told in my religion, you cannot eat from an apple tree given to an apple from Eve to Adam. It was not the apple tree, it was the tree of life, our life, and it was eating each other or doing such unspeakable things to another human, no matter what colour they were. That is the warning. So 666 is written right through the sequence, not because I suspect that the leaders here in our instant now are in cahoots with these people, but certainly when they started out they would have been exactly that. Any start of any cycle would have been a very, very educated people, some far smarter than us, having taken the option to come back and begin a new race of developing beings, humans, on the planet. And we ask ourselves, why is that the case? Because we are told with the management, their management here, we can have roughly between a 21 and 22 hour day. I think that's why this last guy is shorter. It's because the last hour is not quite a full hour, just like their thousands of years are not quite a full thousand. And that I would expect that what we're saying, you could say, well, why don't you leave us like that? And that is a very good question. It's a good question, all right. When we look at this cycle here, which is 65,000 years, the only place that 21,000 additional years can be added is here. I mean, it can be added here, but there would be no geotechnical reason why. You're going to leave it out there to get another 21,000 years colder. So why are you getting a 60 or another 21,000 years added into these inner rings of rotation? Because that's the only place that makes logic and common sense that it would be. And I will tell you why. When we look at these here, this sort of answers the question that we just asked. So in other words, why don't you just leave us there? Okay? When we get to this point here, with the very point we are now, we are being told, and I believe we're being told by these 6 men here, that it is 6 months away from the crossing of the plane. That's why on this side we have, listen, I don't think that's March. I actually think this is December, the end of the year. This is 1st of July. These are the 3 months prior. I want you to note the staff. It's always done like that. It's held like that to represent the angle of the Earth's axis. Note that when we're doing this, what we're doing is we're going to try and straighten it. You'll note that the line here is the same angle as the line there, but that angle there is much more acute than this one. And that's what they're saying. They need to get the angle of the Earth's axis down to that point before the crossing of the plane of the sun. The movement of mass of land here, I'm looking at that and saying, yes, it's got to move from 3 places, but it's got to be moved at the same time. Okay, so it may be still a 3-month period here to do this, but it is a slow process and it'll move all 3 at the very same time, whether they float, slide or do however they do it. Very, very smart. I also, when I said float or slide, I want you to bring your attention directly up above there. You've got the very thing happening, a mass getting slid on water. And I've also suggested that what they do is bore underneath the continental mass. The pressure of the ocean itself underneath is enough to break the land mass if it's in actual fact been drilled out and prepared. And that is probably why we're hearing all these stories about unusual noises underground, or the horns in the air, the noises and unusual things that are going on all over the globe at the moment may be very well them doing what it is they're intending to do. So then understanding that if we follow this procedure, okay, so in other words, the land masses are moved, the water is drained enough to get our high tide, being our low tide, which is what I would expect, they would tell us that. Then we get to a situation where we now are on the plane of the sun and we do our 16,000 years along here on the horizontal plane of the sun, and we say to ourselves, and the moon we've come up with a straight axis. We've got the moon moving in towards the sun and back, and in towards the sun and back, giving us our seasons that would be absent with a straight axis. Why don't you leave us there? It's a good question. I believe the question is answered in the fact of the cycle itself. That cycle there can be done again. So in other words, when we get to the end, that 21,000 year cycle, because we have done the right thing here and we have not drained off very much water, we are a civilization that was not only, that they predicted, not only are we ready and got the right numbers, but we're also technically skilled to make the next move up to here as well. That must be a period of time where they must get involved quite some time. And like I said, I think these cycles, albeit our cycle started 6,000 years ago, and the lesson is shown to start way back here. That's where the lesson is told. So whether or not the lesson, and the people that were given the lesson, you know how it is, when you tell somebody a story, you tell somebody a story, by the time you get to the line of 50 people, the story's changed. Who knows? All I know is what we're seeing here is a story we should have been getting told, and there are people without doubt that know that that's the case. When we look at that cycle then say that the only way you could get 21,000 years here was instead of the half cycle out here going, or the cycle, off-plane cycle, or the movement of this cycle at the end here, moving Earth out to the outer ring, it doesn't. It does another half cycle, and in that half cycle it develops yet another civilization to the point we are right now. And for that to happen, we've got to be on Mars. There's got to be a civilization on Mars at the time they're developing, and then they come back at a time when, once again now, maybe their intervention is slightly different here. But I could see that that is the only way that I could possibly see a 65,000 year cycle here, because there is no humans living on the planet in these outer rings. Once again, we look at the what are deemed to be light bulbs. I'm not saying they're not light bulbs, they obviously look like it, and people deem this to be a situation where they're seeing, you know, lights and electricity used. Yes, it is exactly that, but in reality what it's telling us here is they come back, and in their two cycles here they actually have to lift up the globe, and one of them, in this instance, both times they come here, there is nobody here to meet them. And that's what I'm saying, there is nobody on the globe here. These are the outer cycles, or the cycles that are finished, where the Earth has been too cold, or the one that gets pushed out and lifted up again, back out in the outer ring. There are a few more things I would like to discuss on this parchment. I will move in a little closer to the right side initially, and we will look at the four men with the canes, if you want to call it that, over their shoulder or this end. Note that these cycles, or canes or cycles, are reflective of the cycle that's done at the end, in the last 1,000 years, the cycle that's going to take place at the end. Note the size of them. There are some that are smaller, some that are bigger, some, like I say, that are 6,000 years, some that are 4. If we go back to this side, I believe that this side they're telling us exactly that. If I move into these ones on this side here and say that we're seeing here that the cycles are here with their arms hanging down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, and the last row is us. So I would expect the last unnatural cycle is 6,000 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This could be done like this to identify that we are the 6,000 year cycle and the one we've just finished, because of the megaliths over the planet. Some of them are historic, some of them are not, some of them are us, and that is why we might see that irregularity. I want to show you one other thing here, is take note of what you're seeing here. This is, I think the statue itself is Ramses. He is a leader or not in the history of Egypt. He's bound here. He's bound at the arms and he's bound at the legs on this parchment. He's saying, you are the leader of the world, but we've come to do this and you have got to do absolutely nothing about it. We're doing what we're doing. I would think that if our leaders of our world might want to take that into atonement here, is that in actual fact what that displays. That displays that that leader is bound and tied and he can't do anything at all about the situation that's going to take place. As much as I say that they have warned the leaders, you cannot do anything, really seriously, if they don't do what they need to do. Everybody dies. Everything on the planet with the motion of speed that they say, we would all die. So that is what I wanted to show you there. The only other matter is I would say that if they're talking about the rings of rotation here, that I'm also seeing here, that when we see this double slash, you might be seeing, you know, part of the precession, as I said, in the outer ring, it's going that fast that it can actually complete more of the precession. That could be why we're seeing that there, whereas the inner cycle is still like that. We're seeing the cycle end. The precession does not complete, and nor does it wobble, get more than a quarter way around. I've pretty much said what I wanted to say about the parchment at this point. I think we've taken in enough there to understand what we're seeing, and like I said, I would expect that this movement of land and water prior to the crossing of the plane of the sun is going to happen, and we need to explain to people why and where and how, and I will go through the best I can now to explain to you which land masses are going to be moved in this instance and why. I have the rock, the Tintam rock, albeit it might sound absolutely stupid to go to a rock to tell you why I think a given part of a continent is going to be moved. I know that sounds weird, but we're looking now, if I do this inserted image, I want you to be aware that it is the very same point on the rock we are looking at here. And you can see quite clearly there, it says 4 in Roman numerals. And now come back to this image, this is exactly the same place on the rock. I'll go back here and have a look at this here. We're looking at the shape of South America. It is this rock that told me the big comet, the big round circle here, the bigger one is the one that landed here. The smaller one is the one that landed right where it is, in Central America. I wanted you to be aware that we are under normal microscope light. I'll move the rock so you can see that it's not a picture here. I've got the rock under the microscope here. I might just widen my angle in a minute so you can see that's actually what I'm doing. But I want you to be aware of this, because if I insert the other image now, have a look at it. When you look at this image here, and what we're seeing now, this is under the microscope light. We've got all these extra white lines coming out here with little UFOs on the end of them. That's another story, we won't go into that. But we're seeing this part of South America, different colour. It's gone lighter, okay? And it's not something that was like it originally, okay? I know that sounds stupid if we're going to take just that, but we're not going to take that, because what I'm going to do is show you something else where the very same line is pointed out yet again. I'll have to excuse the mower in the background if you can hear it. I do live next to a school, and unfortunately it has large ovals, and he will be there all day, and I cannot wait here any longer. I want to proceed, so I'm going to say to you now that I've come to South America. We see lines drawn. I'm going to tell you where they go to and from and why. This point here is Easter Island. The line drawn from there to the other side is right on top of the Cairo pyramids. It crosses the equator here, and the line from the equator that goes down here is exactly where it crosses the equator, right? Where that line crosses the equator. It is exactly in line with this tilt here. That line there isn't the line of longitude. In actual fact, where it crosses the equator, it goes right through the middle of the twist of the impact that tilted the globe, which is this one here. You can see where the meteor, this is 700 kilometers wide here, it's huge. You can see the deviation right there. And it's that line of longitude that goes right through there that is exactly where this line is here. Where that line crosses the equator is exactly the same place. The reason I'm showing you that is because if we do a line from there down to that point, we're cutting off exactly the same part that we just saw on the rock. But I would see here that what we're seeing here is a movement of landmass that is not going to be away from the equator here. You may say, that's opposite what I've said. That's exactly right. It is going to be moved, I would expect. This much of it here is going to be moved upwards. And I say upwards because I would expect once that's moved upwards and outwards a little bit, it will make Atlantis, the structure on the ocean surface, come in here, not up here. And that's what it needs to do, and it leads passage for shipping through here. Being a shipping lane like that, the sun's beam that's lifting the water is like this, so there's not going to be a problem here. And that's why they'll have a narrow area here. Just exactly how much of that they move, I do not know, but I wanted to show you that if I go back out again and zoom directly up over the top of the North Pole, and back down this way again, I get back down to Australia here, directly on the same line of longitude. Now, I will put us in the right way up so that we can see what we're doing. And when we come back this way, I think what we're seeing in these inserted rocks, the very same thing. These lines on this rock here are telling us exactly what part they need to move over here. So they're going to move, because they move their landmass up over there, they move this landmass here out and down. So there's going to be a bit of chunk of Australia's cape here moved. I would expect that to be the second place it is on the same line of longitude. That will move down and compensate for the moving up of the other landmass. Africa, on the other hand, is another story. There are multiple places where I've seen, I know it sounds bloody stupid to see it on rocks, but it's not until you actually understand that the rocks and what's on them is extremely high tech. I'm not kidding. It makes the pyramids, and they are exquisite, but it makes the technology in them look like a $12 jigsaw puzzle. That's how complicated the process of marking the rocks is. It's a really, really complicated process, multifaceted laser cutting, all sorts of unusual technologies that we have no idea about. We are told in the message here that this is going to be split across here and move down. It's going to move down very much closer to Madagascar. The movement of land here and how much of it, and whether it's below or above the equator, I'm not 100% certain, but I'm seeing a fair chunk of this move. And remember that in actual fact we moved mass on here above the equator when all this was moved in the last event. So in actual fact what I'm saying here, there may be not a counter move. They're telling us there are 3 places. There are 3 men carrying stuff on the parchment, so we're looking at 3 places in my opinion. So Australia's Cape, South American east portion. So in actual fact they're talking about everything east of Rio de Janeiro, that they're going to go in there and cut that part and move it out and up a little bit. This one they're saying we're going to go this way and it's going to tilt down, and that the landmass is going to go closer to Madagascar. I would say, like I said, that this may be countered by that. But I will bring your attention to one other thing, and that's this. There is no landmass here, and we know from what we're told, even this inserted rock image here, and this portion of it, it is the rock that I have under the microscope, but I look at that and I say that what they're telling us here, they're dropping a situation where this has to be crisscrossed because the ocean's so big. It has to have a line that goes down this way and across this way. In other words, Atlantis, the thing that sits on the ocean that clamps the water and stops the sun lifting up the water from the ocean here in the Pacific, because it's so big it needs to be both ways. I could be wrong, but I do not think so. I am absolutely certain that I've seen a representation, as we have with round Atlantis, our mythical Atlantis, as a round island in the middle of people looking for it. It's probably been removed before and it's about to go back. I would expect it to be underneath Hawaii and on the equator. That would be the line of longitude. It is the very same line of longitude if we go back over this way it corresponds to the moving of the African continent. So it could be that if there is going to be any landmass whatsoever moved on the, from anywhere on the globe to the Pacific Ocean, if there be, because they're telling us they move 3, but they're 3 that are here that we use. They're not saying they don't put something else somewhere else. So in actual fact, if you were going to put a landmass here and you didn't want it to have too much of an effect on the rotation of the Earth, it would in actual fact be telling us that they would take it from here. There is, as I've mentioned, a video on Mr. MBB 333. I watch his stuff all the time, and he's got some unreal things telling me what's going on around the globe. This inserted image here that was written in the sky was on one of his videos where he has people send him in these things that happen. That was written in the sky when I couldn't work out how fast the speed of rotations were. And they wrote it in the sky. How coincidental. Note the things on the end here, they're swivels just like the ones on this plate here. They're telling us how the Earth's rotation on its axis has changed, and it's done when we move in from the outer ring of rotation. So once again, I would just say that I would expect what we're seeing here is we would see a landmass severed from here and put in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Okay, not huge, but big enough. In other words, what I would expect to see is that to allow that if there's transit required by any shipping, that they go through this point in the middle, and that be permitted to allow access. One other matter we must be aware of, that if it's not only just there, we are told the same thing here, that this split here may be true, you may be able to get shipping right through here, because it's actually at the end of this big river here, which is the Nile, I would imagine. It's coming down here, goes all the way through to Lake Alexandrina, that there'd be a crack here, and it's going to traverse and open this up, so the whole lot is all connected via the ocean. But one thing, be aware that in actual fact that move that mass, it's a pretty big mass to move, so in actual words, the mass put back on the equator at the other side may not be huge, but it'll be in a situation where it's going to be big enough to keep any shipping away, far enough away if the steel-hulled ships we still use are going to be used. One thing I wanted you to be aware of, that in South America when they do this, it is obvious that they are trying to help us here. They're trying to help the civilization that's here still continue an ability to be able to trade. So to think that these movements are made like this and they're going to come back here and try and put us back in horse and cart would be an absolutely stupid attitude to take. Coming here, we're getting moved on, we are getting taught the manner in which all of the things that we've seen on these rocks that are so wondrous, we're going to see and we're going to learn how to do it, and the lessons we've learned from the motion of the planet here will be in every high school and every primary school on the Earth's surface. And isn't that an unreal thing? Finally, we've got the numbers this time, guys. That's the reality. The good people have got the numbers, and the numbers, it is they who wanted the numbers, and they've told us we've got the numbers, and they're going to do it the way they want to protect the better part and the larger half of humanity. One last matter I want to mention before we move away from the parchment is that this sequence and the movement of the South American landmass and such things, and this sequence down here of moving the landmass and the water and all such things, and movement of the landmass to a point we can transit shipping. That is, means that they're not coming here to, like I said, put us back in a horse and cart. We have the numbers that we needed, and a percentage of our population is not eating from the tree of life, in other words, each other. There are more of us good people than there are bad, and this is what they're going to do to remedy the situation. We don't stay on this plane forever and ever. We are shown that sometimes it can extend beyond. I would expect it's duly, because this process is followed, the water that goes in the planet is not as bad, nowhere near as much, because the land masses are moved. so they therefore can do the same process again after this one. Whether they're showing us that that isn't the case in ours, I do not know why. I would expect there is a reason, then undoubtedly. That I wanted to say that in actual fact that wouldn't even exist. None of this here would exist. So the situation is that they're coming and they're going to try and help our civilization, and it would obviously be that the truth would be in everybody's ears. So that would be the situation, and that would gravely change. We are looking at the likelihood of a number of people being on our planet to be around about 5 billion. And like I said, they may, some instances with this inserted glyph once again, that mid-cycle, they could come back here and the situation could be that atrocious. And imagine if the absolute worst that we're hearing was greater than less. I could understand why they would just take off a given amount of people that they wanted, so many billion, and just let the thing roll through. Don't worry about doing any of this, just let it happen. Because quite frankly, I think that's exactly what that 48,000 year cycle does. It tells you these people didn't make it, we let it roll through, bang. And because they consider it a natural catastrophe, they probably don't worry about it. In our instance, we've got the right numbers, they're coming to do this, and that is their intent. And like I said, it says here, you leaders are going to be bound and do nothing about the process that needs to take place. One other matter. It is obvious in this field here then, the one prior to our unnatural cycle, that this has got Atlantis installed across the ocean. There's crisscross across the Pacific. It's got the moon going in and out to supply the weather changes we need. This is an advanced society here. Very, very advanced. There's UFOs flying all over the earth here, and it's not just humans that are on the planet here. This is everybody here. This is all our ancestors. And when I say all our ancestors, if I go back to this period here and say somewhere, then pick any point in this 16,000 years and tell me, with all due respect to our Aboriginal elders in the country I live in, what do you think your Aboriginal elders are doing in this period of time? I don't mean to be disrespectful, I'm merely saying, if they are saying, it's not just you, it's us, anybody, any race of people on the planet, how far do you think you're going to be here? You know your own youth now. Do you think they would say, oh, listen, I'm going to walk away from this and go back out and live in the outback, hunting kangaroo to survive? Do you think they're doing that in this point? Because that's a question we should ask ourselves. I ask you that, and I say to that because of the following image. We see something that looks like a painting on a cave, and its understanding and knowing what it meant is very, very, very valuable. It told me about how long the inner ring of rotation was. It told me when the cycle ended. It told me when I come off the cycle here that I'm not slowed down. I've still got a 10-hour day. When I got to the 2,000 year mark, moving back in, we are still beyond Mars here. We're getting told when we're getting people put back on the planet here. It's one hell of a cave painting, isn't it? We've got a hand here telling us we've got to come back and lift up the globe the same way as we are seeing in the Egyptian reliefs that I've already shown you. So in actual fact, it is no caveman here painting this, is it? Really? Seriously. Do you think the person here painting this is a caveman? I don't think so. I think the man that left that there is a very, very, very smart person. He probably flew to the cave in a UFO, and his task was to leave that, so that when we saw it, somebody like me now understood what it actually meant. But I doubt very much the man was standing there with a loincloth and a stick or whatever doing that, because it is not done that way. I swear to that. He's done the same way the messages are on the rocks. They just stand there with a machine with a little laptop and go, and it just moves the matter. That's why we have caves in Sardinia that have multiple paintings that are 20 or 30,000 years apart. If you're doing matter transfer, You can transfer any matter, including the particle that we use to date objects. The reason I raised the last issue is I wanted to show you this image. This cave painting is in Kakadu. For those of you who do not know, I will highlight and mark it here on the map. It's up quite very close to the landmass in Australia, where we're going to get cut away. I wanted to bring this to your attention because I've told you about the cycles we have and the movement out to the outer ring and the movement back and the movement out and the movement back. What are we looking at on this here? We are looking at movement out, arrows like this, 3 this way, 1 this way. This one here is going both ways. So if we're going out this way, the only way we can come back is this way. We go out this way, the only way we can come back is this way. So every way we can go out, we can only come back one way. Did I not tell you that in this cave painting, certainly not an Aboriginal painting, this one, but our cycle back in that we went to, and then there was an off-plane cycle? Is that not what we know that that's the case? So we go back here, we're seeing when we come back in here, okay, well we're here, and then what's this? We're standing up at the axis. Look how many lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6,000 year off-plane cycle. Is that not telling us what? The very same thing. It's a 6,000 year off-plane cycle. Look at the note on this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit more. So there's a 4,000 year cycle there. You think a man that painted this was an Aboriginal standing there in a loincloth, feeding himself what he could get off the land around him? I doubt very much it was. I very, very much doubt. If he was doing this, he knew full well about the rotation of Earth around the sun, about the multiple rings of rotation, about the different directions you can come in and go out, about the off-plane cycles that are 6,000 and 4,000 years old. I would have a feeling that the person that painted that had very little to do with spearing kangaroos and living off the land. I think that what we're seeing here is a created history, not just for the Aboriginal elders on this land, it's all of us. We have all been left a history that is not quite correct. It's been left here because what was here was swept away by huge waves only 6,000 years ago. One last thing I wanted to discuss was that if what I'm saying here is correct and it's related to the cycles, it certainly seems to be that way. We've got 6 and like I said, I've counted 4 and a little bit here. I would expect that what we're seeing here is that they're actually telling us here that we're getting an off-plane cycle on the way out. Not as we come back here each time we are having an off-plane cycle that is the cycle or before that off-plane cycle where the Earth is laid flat and lifted up again to change the direction of rotation on the Earth on its axis, that happens here, and then we have the off-plane cycle, but here our arrow goes out. So it is telling me, in my opinion, we have an off-plane cycle here on the way out. When would you do that? When would that occur? I will show you where I think that takes place. So when we come back to our parchment now, just for the last time, and realise that what we're being told there is a sequence where, that is at the end of the sequence here, where it goes back out, and there is another off-plane sequence in between here, going back out, and which is off-plane means we've got an axis of 24 degrees or thereabouts, driven by the rotating vertical planes of the sun. But I would see, if we're going to see another developing nation here, they're saying to us they're developing here another bunch of people to the point we are now. If that is 4,000 years, well, it's going to be in less than 2. This is why I think the cycle we were on is 6,000 years, but I would expect they were here not 6,000 years ago, but somewhere in the middle there. I would expect they come back in return in the middle, before the middle of that cycle, and the people that come back after the cycle at this. This is the very middle of our cycle. It's the one that puts the poles in 3 months of darkness or 3 months of sun, depending on where on the planet you are. But certainly north and south are very, very ordinary places to live, and there's not a lot in the middle that's good. That's what happens on the middle of our cycle. That cycle there, if it's only 4,000 years, is telling us that they can get a civilization to our point in less than 2,000 years. Which makes me wonder why, when we get taught at our schools that Julius Caesar and all such people that lived within Italy and built all these mammoth big buildings and everything like that, can you tell me what year it was? If you walked up to Caesar in, 300 BC and said, "What date is it, sir?" and he'd say, "Oh, it's 300 BC. Of course he wouldn't. Why would they have changed the year? I think 2,000 years ago is probably when our lesson actually started again. But that's just my opinion. It's not there. I'm only seeing that because I see a fictitious history being left us. If we look at these two rocks that I've just inserted now, the reason I've put those on the screen, having just moved away from the Kakadu wall painting, is to make you aware of the culture, of the Aboriginal culture in our country, and a couple of rules and regulations. One is you're not supposed to take rocks away from where you're supposed to. I'm not an Aboriginal, so therefore I removed these rocks, and I'm glad I did, because if I hadn't have, there would not be one video on my channel, not one, about any of what we've done here. None of it. It is all being driven by the bigger of these two rocks. It is that rock that made me go and look at the pyramid and understand its purpose. It was all led from those rocks. I haven't chucked them back in a river where I found them just yet. I think I might wait until the people that put them there come and tell me whether they actually want me to do that or not. I don't mean to be disrespectful in your laws, because your laws and cultures say leave them where they are, and I'm glad that that culture and understand why that is like that is because if those rocks had not been found where they were, they may not have led to the same outcome. So the fact that they were in the river over here, in the hole it was, on the line of longitude they were on, is in actual fact what made me go to the pyramids, and we have gotten all this way along, a year and a half later, having understood the meaning of those two rocks. So having gone through that process, I thought it would be, and without being disrespectful at all, no intent like that ever meant from me to the Aboriginal culture in my country, I just wanted to come back and finish off with some rocks. I thought that would be an appropriate thing, especially if I've just shown you a cave painting that you hold very, very dear to your ancestors, and so you should. And this is what I mean, not just you guys too, it's every one of us. Our cultures have been 6,000 years ago living in a far more advanced world than we live in. Every culture, including the Aboriginal culture, every one of our elders, and some of them have chosen to come back and kick off another civilization here and walk away from what would have been a very advanced culture to come back and kick off our situation again. And like I said, the bottom line of that parchment, if we look and you say, why don't we just allow that just to keep going on and on and on and on, I would bring your attention to one of the things that's in media at the moment is artificial intelligence. Understand that in the limit of our cycles, I believe they're telling us their problem. In other words, the constant improvement of one being humans, right? So 15 million years ago, I believe we are getting told we are like we are now 15 million years ago. That's what I believe we are being told by the way it all set up. The reason why we don't see this sequence just go on and on and on and on is because of exactly that. They've said to us in that way that the humans back then, they did advance. They got that advanced from a point of view. Just imagine if you were telepathic and your partner was not next door, or not in a bedroom, or not next door to you, but was thousands of kilometres away. That you can do it by your mind. I don't know, there must be a limit where Mother Nature takes back what she does not no longer use, and situations like that, the changes in temperature, it could have been a whole range of things. Maybe even their own manipulation of their own genome when we talk about AI. So that's a possibility. That is why I believe that sequence does not go on and on and on, and the sequence is ending, because they say they're going to protect our ability to breed and not get beyond a given point of understanding. So that's what I think we do. We get to a point. I'm not saying there aren't people moved away from the planet. There would be, without doubt. But they always have Earth here, cycling as it is, and I would suspect that the Earth's population is not necessarily made up of one planet. It was actually, in the first instance, quite possibly 3. I just wanted to mention that's the case. And I thought it would be wise to come back here today and have a look at a couple of the rocks, which is why I've got the setup that you can now see when I widen the angle here. I will just show you that I have got that rock here. It is under the microscope. You can see it wiggle, and I'm just going to leave it there so you can see that portion of it. So you can see the white mark there, the black mark here, and so on, so that when I zoom in you'll know it's the same rock, and we're doing it live. And we're going to have a look at a few things on these, and there's 1 or 2 other rocks that I'll show you. The image that you see on the screen now is obtained by a microscopic view of this rock. This is a picture of it. It is a very, very plain and simple, ordinary looking rock. It is very smooth to touch. It is very smooth, and probably feels a little bit heavier than you would think it would, being the size it is. So one would expect it's pretty compound and in respect particle size and so on. I'm not a geologist, nor archaeologist or Egyptologist. I'm just merely showing you what appears to be a message left in more than one area. I'm going to just move that rock so you can see that that is the rock that I've got under the microscope. I'll move it back to that point, and what I want you to do is, if you would, just to watch. What I'm going to do now is turn the light off on the microscope and then put the light off like that, and use my external light, which is a little LED flat device like so. This is one rock, and I just want you to keep your eye on what we see when I move the light around here in the fashion I do, that this is how it works. You move the light from side angle while you've got the microscope focused on a given point on the rock. There are things I see on a rock that I don't know why, I can see things and what angles to put them and so on. So in that instance of this one, it wasn't that difficult for me to show you why. It wasn't these images here. I'll be honest, I've had this rock under here already, so I know where to move the light to a degree, or so it's a bit quicker for you to see. But what I want you to see now is watch what happens now when I move the light around this side, and watch what moves from what we were just seeing, which appear to be like sort of structures and buildings, to about here. And watch what you see happen here. You see this in the middle of the screen here. When I get him right, he's extremely easy to see when I get the light in the right spot. So I wanted to show you that, in actual fact, there's not a lot of difference between that, alright, look at this, and this. Isn't that amazing? And yet by all stretch of the imagination you would think, oh no, it's just a little flat river rock. I'd have picked that up and chucked it across the river, saying it was a little perfect little skimmer. And yet, this is what I mean. It's an amazing situation. This inserted image now is a tin tan rock. I have shown you this before, but I wanted to come back here because if I'm, like I said, I need to have a bit of a break from doing such things, and I really have gone from a point of view of planetary motion and the expectation of what's going to go down pretty much to end, I guess, in that there's probably not a whole lot more. I know I've said that before, but I really do think that we've covered most things. I wanted to show you that rock because if we come back to the screen now and have a look at what's here, it is actually in this lounge room, only a couple of metres behind where I sit now, where this rock that I've just shown you, the Tintam rock, looks to have a chip in the corner. And it was not long after I had come to the conclusion that Wilson's rock, this one, had a line on it that represented the imaginary line that goes from Easter Island to the pyramids and through many megaliths all around the globe. I knew of that. Okay, and that was something I knew because of my interest in the megaliths and whatnot. And like I said, I didn't come here to do this or solve anything. It was more, this is how it came about. Because what happened, after I realised that Wilson's rock had that sort of connection to the pyramids, and it was in the time when I was just starting to go and look at the pyramids, I picked this rock up off the coffee table. It's been there for years. And this is the chip of the rock. Right now it looks like a chip when you're a fair way away from it, but I had a close look at it. And I was looking at these marks on it. And I'm looking at that thinking, that's not a chip. I'll move it along here so you can see what I'm talking about. Where the rock looks like it's been hit is here. Alright, so and this is under normal light. This has got miniature writing all over it, this rock. It's an absolutely unbelievable thing. See just here, I've gone down this before, but there's letters and writing, what appears to be writing to me, and I don't read Arabic, but if there was any writing I think it looked like, that's what it looks like. I wanted to start here because this is really where it all started. So I thought, well, what best way to start than where it actually, or where best to end than where it started, which is right here. I mean right there, exactly there. It was actually just under normal eye, light and eye, that become visible, that it was smooth. It was not a chip. Initially I thought it was like, you know how rocks can fracture. So what I want to do now is finish off by moving the light across this portion as we have done the last couple of rocks. So what I'll do is I'll turn first of all the light down, okay, and like I said, some of the stuff that I have seen on this rock, I'm not kidding, it is just beyond, it's just beyond anything I possibly imagined ever even seeing. I guess that's the thing that really blows me out with this, is just the skills that it takes to do it. It's an amazing thing. Absolutely amazing situation when in reality in the end you see what it is that's been hidden from you. And it's not just finding out about the pyramids, I can assure you that working out what they were about, I can assure you the most astounding things that I have seen have been here doing this, and it is amazing. I cannot believe some of the things are manufactured, the way they're manufactured. It is so unreal. There'll be a spot here where I'll probably pick up about 4 or 5 UFOs. I'll be honest with you, I did look at this for a little while, this portion of the rock, but not that, I didn't have the right environment. Sometimes it's best, like I said, to wait. You've got to be extremely patient to move the light around to see what it is that, you know, what else you could see. I mean, you might think, oh well, that's all good, look at that there, that's pretty amazing, but you might think, oh well, that's all, and then you go over the top here and it just turns into something else totally different, depending on which way the light is. That's why I said to you before, when you look at those faces and how clear they come out, you can see that it's going to be a face even before you get to that particular point. Now see, this one may not have that much in it in respect to certain things, right? It looks like there's a pretty good UFO over this side. But what you would do if I was doing this you know, myself, I would be probably moving it like this as well. So I would go along here a bit, and I might just stop here, and then move this down this way and see whether or not, you know, if you're ever going to get an arrow pointing at anything, I guess that's a pretty good one. Yeah, look over that way. Okay. It looks like there's something in here that's going to be of interest. You can see what I mean by how you could get immersed. Absolutely spectacular. See, I'm actually bending the light away now. The flat part of the light is not pointing at the rock, it's like pointing away into the lounge room. Well, that's probably what I'm supposed to see. See how I've just gone there to where I've got that little part there? It's sort of now saying, oh well, look, if I go this way, that's going to be more like a mountain there now, right? So I go that way at it and see whether or not that makes a difference to what I was seeing. See how I've done that now? Now I might be able to see and like be more at the right angle for what it is they were hoping to show us. I still think we've got to come from down here. There you go, tidal waves coming in at them. That's what that is. Tidal waves coming into the coast. See that? That's what that is. That's what they've been trying to get. And this is what I was saying, sometimes you've just got to be patient. Once you get the right angle, you'll get exactly what it is they're trying to show you. And that, my friend, is what they're showing us there is big surf coming flying in. If I move it a little bit different, that's the arrow again, see? Isn't that weird? Isn't that like spectacular? Look, watch it. Is that not spectacular? Or is that not spectacular? I just wanted to show you this because it really is quite exquisite how the process, you know, how they do it. It is absolutely astronomical to think you can find images like this on rocks. It is absolutely profound. I want to just keep your eye on this because as I move this around and up here is where you will begin to see the writing that is here and the marks that are on the rock that you don't get to see in here. I'll move it up just a tad. In here. See all that? You don't get to see those marks, they are on this rock everywhere. Right? It's a very, very, very unusual sort of thing we have there. Like I said, it's easy to tell when you come back over this side and get the right lighting there. So I mean how quickly you can change the image and the appearance of what it is you're seeing just by using that just slight angle change, what it's like, you know. And then if you come back up this side again, you're more, you know, more the tidal waves, you can see the writing or the, see that? Or the symbols. There's seems to be a lot of symbols written on this rock, always has been. I thought I wanted to show you this because I thought really, that really did look quite exquisite when I get it to about there. And down here where you start to see that, as in my opinion, we're seeing sort of tidal waves come in at this, at the coastline here with the mountain there. See how you've got that like this? You've got big waves coming in, about to pound the shore. I'm going to move this rock just a tad because I think there's something on the very corner that I think they want us to see. So I'm going to just move this just a bit. Be patient for a second if you would. We'll just see what happens on this corner here. Well, looks like there might be a face looking out as well. I'll just move that up just a tad. Sometimes the very chip on the rock is where you'll find something very interesting. come on this side was to show you that if I do a, just even a little bit like it down the bottom. Like I said, it's not difficult to see why I thought the rock was chipped. When you look at it, it's not chipped at all. That's not giving me one of those diggers going through the ground. It looks a bit like it, isn't it? You can even see the lines of power and like a little bit of a face there on that side, on the right. The right at the bottom, it looks like you're getting like waves down on that side as well. Isn't that amazing? These are images that if I sat here and played, admittedly, you may or may not see something here. I'm just having a bit of a play. I thought it was worthwhile to just come back and move this around a bit on that corner, only because it seemed to tell me to have a bit of a look there. I'm not saying I'm at the right angle to achieve the task here, I'm just merely saying that it would appear to me to be that we've certainly got some imagery here that is very spectacular either way, really. Some of it really is really spectacular stuff. You know, I hope you're seeing that clearly. It's not just one rock, and it doesn't matter whether or not they're, you know, they look like they're fancy, because as you can see with the first rock, with this one here, if I put it back under, this is the flat brown rock. You don't have to struggle too difficult, or you know, you don't have to, it's not that fancy a rock, you know. And if we put that back in and we get back to having our facial features, there's also another face that you get up on this person up to the top left here, although it's clear for me, I know I'm videotaping my TV and it does not make things any better for you. But certainly, like I said, it's not coincidence, it's actually by design. See, sometimes if you get it right, I'm just hoping that comes out as good on the camera, you know, because you are seeing it second hand, you always are seeing it second hand. Me doing it this way, but I do it this way so you can see it's live, it's not tricky, it's not manoeuvres. There's nothing I'm tricking here, I'm just letting you know the message has left us on these rocks in the way, in manner, and they've been left is absolutely spectacular. And you would have to agree, would you not? Hey, oh, look at this, we might be able to turn that into a little bit of a city there, do we? See here how that angle changed, moves, there you see almost that writing that I was telling you about, see? See the writing there? It's like text written into the side of the rock. See? Amazing, isn't it? And I'll go back and I'll show you now what it looks like with the microscope light turned on, because that and everything I showed you has just come from there. Is that not amazing? We'll do it again and I'll show you that it's the same rock. Turn the light off, turn the microscope on. I mean the external light on. There's our writing there. Looked like writing to me, that it really does. I come back down this way. I get this angle and my waves come back into waves again, and tidal waves washing in at a coast here. See the mountains in the background and the coastline. Isn't that spectacular? You just wouldn't read about that being on a rock at a river that you would just pick up. Well, in this one you wouldn't. We picked this up, as you can see, with the outside view of it again. It looks like a melted Tim Tam, doesn't it? That is amazing. It looks, when I've got that right, it looks like from this side over here, along the tidal waves is a huge cliff. Like it's like they've lifted the land up above the tidal wave. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Especially when you see it written like that. What an absolutely amazing thing to... Like, not just amazing thing as everything else we're going to learn off these people when they get here, our ancestors, our real ancestors. Look at that, it is just, is that not just a blowout? I'm not kidding. Anyway, look, I think I'll finish up with that. I hope you stayed to the end of the video, because I certainly think it was worthwhile. It is brain-witten and ET art, and I hope that you see that as clearly as I do. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye bye. Have a lovely